What happens when America's most polished journalist collides with the royal family's most controversial export? At first glance, it looks like just another prime-time sit-down. A comfortable studio, polite greetings, and the illusion of civility. But beneath the warm lights of CNN, it becomes clear that Anderson Cooper hasn't come to play along. And Meghan Markle hasn't come to be humbled. She arrives armed with defiance, with a dismissive smile that has polarized audiences worldwide, and with the sharp edge of entitlement that has become her signature. What begins as a conversation shifts quickly into combat, verbal fencing, one side wielding facts, the other wielding attitude. By the time the masks slip, the world is no longer watching an interview. They are witnessing a reckoning. The CNN studio gleams under carefully calibrated lights. Everything is pristine, perfectly measured. Anderson Cooper sits immaculately, his cards aligned, his posture composed, the stillness of the cameras promising to capture every calculated gesture. Across from him sits Meghan Markle, legs crossed with careful precision, her glossy hair catching the light like a halo. She offers that famous practice smile, a smile that has graced magazine covers, a smile designed to charm and disarm. "Meghan," Anderson begins smoothly, "thank you for joining us tonight." "Of course," she replies sweetly, though the sweetness feels laced with something faintly performative. It's always enlightening to sit down with real journalists. The sting in her tone is subtle, but deliberate. Anderson doesn't bite. He inclines his head, acknowledging the jab without returning it. "Let's start simple," he says. "How are you and Harry doing?" For the briefest second, Meghan's smile falters, freezing before it reforms. She leans back slightly, adopting the casual air of someone untouchable. "We're fine," she says. "We're thriving. Stronger than ever, actually, despite what the tabloids would love for people to believe." Her words land with sharp emphasis, polished to sound definitive but edged with defensiveness. Anderson nods evenly, holding her gaze. "There have been rumors," he says, carefully measured. "Some suggesting tension, that Harry struggles with being so far removed from his family, that—" Meghan interrupts with a brittle laugh. "Rumors? Really, Anderson? Do you want to waste time giving oxygen to gossip? Honestly, I'd expect better of you." The invited studio audience shifts in their seats. The dismissal is bold, nearly disrespectful. But Anderson remains unshaken. "I understand your frustration with rumors," he replies calmly. "But part of the public's interest lies in how you're both adjusting, given the very public step you took away from royal life. Isn't it fair to ask how you're navigating those changes?" Meghan's smile tightens into something colder. "Navigating," she repeats, as if tasting the word. "We don't navigate. We lead. We've made choices that serve our happiness, our truth. If people can't handle that, perhaps they should stop projecting their unhappiness onto us." Her words ring with condescension. What was meant to be an answer lands like a rebuke. Anderson shuffles his cards ever so slightly, the movement a silent signal that he won't be deterred. "So let's talk about choices then," he continues, voice steady. "You've spoken about your difficulties with the royal family, about feeling unsupported, silenced. But since stepping away, you've built a successful platform: podcasts, streaming deals, book contracts. Critics argue that you've leveraged the very institution you condemn. What would you say to them?" Meghan tilts her head, the smile returning, sharper now. "I'd say those critics should try walking a mile in my shoes before they make uninformed judgments. I don't apologize for surviving, Anderson. I don't apologize for making a living after being cut off." Her tone rises, sharper and louder, the veneer of civility beginning to fracture. What began as a conversation teeters dangerously into confrontation. Anderson leans forward slightly, his voice still calm but now edged with steel. "But Meghan, it wasn't as if you were destitute. You had a successful acting career before Harry. He has inherited wealth. The perception, fair or not, is that the narrative of financial struggle doesn't align with reality. How do you reconcile that?" Her eyes narrow. "Perception," she nearly spits. "That's the problem, isn't it? Everyone thinks they're entitled to analyze our lives like we're characters in a play. They don't know the truth. They don't know what we sacrificed." Anderson lets the silence hang, the audience feeling the weight of her indignation. Then, softly but firmly, he asks the question that changes the room. "What exactly did you sacrifice, Meghan?" The words drop like a stone in still water. For the first time, Meghan hesitates. Her lips part, but the response comes slower, less rehearsed. "Privacy," she says finally. "Peace. The right to live without being torn apart daily by people who have never even met us." Anderson nods, thoughtful, but there is steel in his blue eyes. "Yet here you are," he replies, "sitting before millions, telling your story on your terms. Does that not contradict the desire for privacy?" The studio air grows heavy. Meghan shifts, her carefully composed posture betraying the smallest flicker of unease. The clash is no longer about rumors or headlines. It is about credibility. It is about truth versus performance, substance versus spectacle. And in that moment, the interview transforms. What began as polite questions under bright lights has become something else entirely, a trial before the court of public opinion. Anderson sits steady, unyielding, while Meghan recalculates behind her practiced smile. The battle lines are drawn, and the world is watching. Meghan bristled, her posture tightening. "It's not contradiction," she snapped. "It's control. We choose what to share. That's our right." "Of course," Anderson agreed smoothly, not missing a beat. His tone was calm, his words deliberate. "But that also makes you public figures who can be questioned on the choices you make. You can't ask for privacy while also commanding a global spotlight without scrutiny. That's the balance journalism demands." The audience stirred, a low hum of tension rippling across the room. Meghan's legs crossed more tightly, her hands clasping together in her lap like a shield. The mask of charm was thinning now, and something colder, sharper, was slipping through. "Balance," she echoed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Funny, Anderson. You talk about balance, yet you sit there with the same smug authority as every other man who's ever tried to diminish me." The words cracked across the studio like a slap. A hush fell. Anderson blinked once, slowly, then leaned in slightly, his expression composed, his voice even, almost gentle. "I'm not diminishing you, Meghan," he said firmly. "I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference." Her laugh came sharp, humorless, brittle. "Accountable to whom? To you? To the press that twists every word I say? To a public that's already made up its mind about me?" Anderson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were surgical, deliberate. "Accountable to the truth." The silence that followed was deafening, thick enough to feel in the air. What had been framed as a polished discussion was unraveling, morphing into open sparring. And for the first time, Meghan's carefully polished composure looked fragile. The cameras rolled steadily, but the atmosphere in the CNN studio had shifted dramatically. The glossy civility of the opening had evaporated, leaving something raw, volatile. Anderson sat poised, a pen balanced between his fingers, while Meghan's body language grew taut, her charm slipping into visible irritation. Anderson's next card was deliberate. He didn't need to look down. He already knew the question. "Meghan, let's talk about Harry," he said, his voice steady. "He's spoken about the toll this has taken on him, the distance from his family, the loss of the military roles he valued so deeply. How is he adjusting?" Meghan's expression froze for half a beat. Then came the practiced smile, but sharper now, like glass glinting under the light. "Harry is thriving," she declared. "He's never been happier. We've built a life that finally reflects our values. So no, Anderson, he's not pining for the past. If that's what you're insinuating." Anderson's head tilted slightly. "I'm not insinuating, Meghan. I'm asking. There are reports." "Reports?" she cut in, her tone clipped, brittle. "From which tabloids? The same ones that have stalked us, lied about us, and profited from our suffering? Please. We don't dignify rumors." The audience shifted uneasily, sensing the sharp bite in her words. Anderson remained steady, voice measured. "Not just tabloids," he continued. "There have been whispers from those close to the family suggesting Harry feels isolated, that he's caught between two worlds. Do you acknowledge that possibility?" Meghan's eyes narrowed. Her smile was gone. "Do you acknowledge," she countered, her tone icy, That maybe Harry makes his own choices? That maybe, just maybe, a grown man can decide for himself where he's happiest? Or do you prefer the narrative that I somehow control him? Anderson leaned forward slightly, his tone low but edged with unmistakable firmness. It's not about control, Meghan. It's about the fact that before you, Harry was one of the most beloved members of the royal family. He had a role, a purpose, a deep connection with the British public. Since stepping away, much of that has eroded. So, it's a fair question. Has your marriage cost him more than it's given him? The question hung in the air like a live wire. Meghan's jaw tightened. For the first time, her voice cracked with heat. That is insulting, she snapped. We are partners. Equals. Harry didn't lose anything. He gained freedom. He gained love. He gained me. Anderson's gaze never wavered. His tone remained calm, but his words landed with precision. And in exchange, he lost his family. His titles. His country's affection. Was that a trade worth making? Meghan's laugh rang out, sharp and humorless. You sound like one of those bitter royalists who thinks the crown is sacred. Let me remind you, Anderson, we're not living in the 18th century. Harry doesn't need to bow and scrape for anyone's approval. Her words dripped with disdain, and the audience murmured audibly, their discomfort growing with each barbed exchange. Anderson inhaled slowly, his expression unmoved. Let's pivot then, he said evenly. Before Harry, you had a successful acting career. Many people knew you from Suits. Do you ever regret leaving that behind? Walking away from a professional identity of your own? Meghan tilted her head, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Regret? Hardly. I outgrew it. Playing dress-up on a TV set is nothing compared to the impact I've made on a global stage. I didn't trade down, Anderson. I traded up. The arrogance in her tone was unmistakable, reverberating across the silent room. Anderson's brows lifted slightly, but his voice never broke its steady rhythm. Some might argue you traded independence for notoriety. That you went from being Meghan Markle, actress, to Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, defined primarily by your husband's name. Meghan's composure cracked again, her smile curdling. That's sexist. And reductive. I am more than my husband's wife. Of course, Anderson replied smoothly. He paused, just long enough for the silence to sharpen. But without Harry, would you be sitting here tonight, on this stage, in front of millions? The air in the studio seemed to freeze. Meghan's lips parted, but for once, no quick retort came. The weight of the question pressed down like a stone, heavy and unyielding. Would Netflix and Spotify have offered those contracts? Would publishing houses have chased your story? Meghan's lips tightened into a thin line. Her voice, when it came, was colder, more deliberate, cutting through the studio air. You clearly don't understand who I am. I've always had influence. I've always had presence. The world just wasn't ready to acknowledge it until I forced them to. Anderson let the silence stretch, the stillness amplifying her hostility. His calm demeanor only sharpened the contrast with her rising defensiveness. Then, in that quiet, deliberate cadence, he asked softly but pointedly, "Or did the world only notice because of the crown attached to your name?" The blow landed. Meghan's eyes flashed, her breath catching audibly in the microphone. She leaned forward now, no trace of charm, her tone openly confrontational. "You don't get to decide my worth, Anderson. And frankly, your line of questioning is insulting." Anderson leaned back, unshaken, his voice even lower, more deliberate. "I'm not deciding your worth, Meghan. I'm asking whether the worth you claim was truly earned, or borrowed." The audience inhaled sharply, the tension now electric. Meghan's practiced smile was gone, stripped away, replaced by something raw, anger laced with fear. Her armor was cracking, and Anderson knew it. For him, that was the sign. The real interview was only just beginning. The studio air had grown dense, heavy with anticipation. Meghan Markle sat rigid in her chair, posture stiff, hands tightening in her lap. Across from her, Anderson Cooper was composed, almost statuesque. His notes rested neatly on the desk, untouched, because he hardly needed them. He spoke with the cadence of a man guiding the conversation to inevitable truth, while Meghan could feel herself losing ground. "Meghan," he began evenly, "let's address what so many are wondering. You've spoken often about the pain of your time in the royal family, but you've also enjoyed global recognition because of it. Without that platform, without the crown's name, do you believe the world would still be listening to you now?" Her eyes narrowed, defensive. "So what? You're saying I'm irrelevant without them?" Anderson didn't flinch. "I'm saying your voice was amplified by the institution you now criticize. That's not judgment, it's fact." She leaned forward, voice sharp, every word biting. "And I suppose you think I should have stayed silent. Endured racism. Endured being ignored when I begged for help, just so the monarchy's spotless image could stay intact." The audience stirred, sensing her hostility. Anderson's tone, however, remained maddeningly calm. "I think there's a difference between speaking truth to power and building a brand around grievance. Many respected your initial courage. But now, some believe the story has become selectively crafted." Meghan's laugh was bitter, humorless. "Selective? That's rich. Anderson, you sit there in your expensive suit with your privilege, telling me how to share my story." Anderson's gaze sharpened. "Privilege is being born into a monarchy with palaces, staff, and global adoration. And yet, the British public, who once welcomed you warmly, now seems divided at best. Why do you think that is?" Her jaw tightened. "Because the British media poisoned them against me. It's that simple." Anderson leaned in, voice firmer. "Is it that simple? Or did the public's affection cool after decisions you made, walking away from duties, criticizing the Queen's institution while still using its titles, moving to America, signing lucrative media deals?" Meghan's eyes flashed. "We had to move. We had to protect ourselves." "From what?" Anderson asked softly. "From scrutiny. From responsibilities you accepted when you married into that family." The words cut like glass. Meghan's voice rose, sharp with anger. "Responsibilities? You mean servitude. You mean smiling and waving while being treated like a burden. That's not a life, Anderson. That's a prison." Anderson let the silence breathe, then asked the question that drew the entire studio tighter. "Did Queen Elizabeth personally mistreat you?" Meghan hesitated. A flicker of calculation flashed across her face before she delivered a clipped, rehearsed response. "I have nothing but respect for the late Queen. But the system she embodied, it was archaic. Suffocating." Anderson's voice sharpened. "So it wasn't her personally. It was the system. The monarchy." "Exactly," Meghan said quickly, relieved to anchor herself in safer territory. Anderson nodded slowly. "And yet, it's the monarchy that gave you the platform, the attention, the influence. Without it, you were a supporting actress on a cable show. With it, you became a global figure. Does that not complicate your narrative?" Her composure snapped. "I don't need a crown to matter, Anderson. I never did. The monarchy needed me more than I needed them. I was the fresh air, the diversity, the modernity they couldn't produce on their own." Gasps rippled through the audience. Her words dripped with arrogance, echoing across the studio like a gavel strike. Anderson's lips pressed into a thin, measured line. "That may be how you see it. But from the outside, it looks different. The monarchy has existed for centuries. You were there less than 2 years before walking away. Do you truly believe you changed it, or did it change you?" Meghan's laugh came sharp, brittle, defensive. The walls she had so carefully built were beginning to crumble, and Anderson Cooper sat steady, waiting, knowing the reckoning had only just begun. "I opened eyes. I exposed truths. That's more than most could have done." Anderson leaned back in his chair, gaze steady, calm in the storm. His reply was measured, almost surgical. "Or perhaps," he said, "you burned bridges and called it revolution." The silence that followed was crushing. Meghan's chest rose and fell quickly, her anger barely concealed. The audience sat frozen, eyes darting between her sharp breaths and Anderson's impenetrable calm. The air was heavy, thick with the kind of tension only raw confrontation can summon. Anderson shuffled his notes, not because he needed them, but as if to punctuate the stillness. He didn't look down. His eyes remained locked on her. Let's move, he said evenly, to your decision to settle in America. Some say it's hypocritical. You left Britain citing a desire for privacy, but here you've pursued podcasts, interviews, documentaries, each one amplifying the very attention you claim to despise. How do you reconcile that? Meghan's voice dripped disdain. It's called survival, Anderson. We were cut off. We had to provide for ourselves. Unlike the institution, nobody pays our bills anymore. Anderson's eyebrow lifted slightly, his tone polite yet pointed. Except, of course, the streaming giants who paid tens of millions for your story. That doesn't exactly scream hardship. Meghan's cheeks flushed crimson. Her voice cracked with fury. How dare you reduce everything we've endured to money? You think it's about wealth? It's about security, dignity, protecting our children. Anderson's next words were a scalpel. Protecting your children, or protecting your brand? The blow landed hard. Meghan froze, lips parting, but no words came. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. The silence stretched, a silence so thick the audience barely dared breathe. Anderson leaned forward, his voice soft but decisive. Meghan, you left a 1,000-year-old institution claiming you wanted peace, but what you've built looks less like peace and more like a business. The audience erupted into a low murmur. The interview was spiraling into dangerous territory. Meghan's face hardened, but her voice shook with indignation. You don't get to define me, she snapped. You don't get to decide what my life means. Anderson's gaze was unflinching. I don't need to. The world is watching, and they see the contradictions. The studio's silence became unbearable. What had begun with polite smiles was now a battlefield, and Meghan was losing ground with every exchange. She sat stiffly, hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles pale. Her glossy composure, so carefully rehearsed, was gone, replaced with anger and flashes of panic. Anderson leaned in, deliberate, almost prosecutorial. Meghan, you've spoken about being silenced, about suffering, about leaving an institution that failed you. But let's be honest, with each other, and with viewers at home. Would we be sitting here right now if you hadn't married Prince Harry? The question hit like a thunderclap. The audience collectively inhaled. Meghan's eyes flashed, but she forced a smirk. So now you're saying I'm nothing without him. How very predictable. Anderson didn't blink. I'm saying your entire public identity, your influence, your contracts, your platform, all stem from one fact. You married into the most famous family in the world. And since leaving that family, you've built a career criticizing it while still trading on its name. Isn't that true? Meghan's voice rose, sharp, defensive. That's incredibly sexist. I had a career before Harry. I was successful before Harry. I mattered before Harry. Anderson's reply was devastating in its calm precision. Yes, Meghan. You were an actress on a mid-tier cable show. Talented, perhaps, but not globally known. You became a household name the moment you put on that tiara and walked into Windsor. That's not sexism. That's reality. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The silence betrayed her. Anderson pressed on, voice steady, every word sharper than the last. You've made millions from interviews, documentaries, podcasts, all on the back of a name you claim to despise. You say you were silenced, yet no one has spoken more than you. You say you wanted privacy, yet you've lived in the spotlight by choice. You say you were powerless, yet you've wielded enormous power in shaping the narrative. Meghan, do you see the contradiction? Her composure cracked fully. You don't understand what I've been through, she snapped, voice trembling. You don't understand the pain, the isolation, the fear. You sit there judging me like you know my life. But you don't. Anderson leaned back, grave now. I understand what you've told us. And what I see is a woman who wants all the benefits of royalty without the responsibilities. A woman who claims independence, but whose platform collapses without Harry's name. Strip away the crown, the titles, the connections, and what's left? Meghan's lip quivered. She tried to steady herself, but her voice broke. I am more than his wife. I am more than a duchess. She faltered. Her eyes glistened. I am. But the words dissolved into silence. Tears welled. She turned her face away, blinking rapidly, her carefully constructed image shattering under the weight of the questions. The audience sat frozen, torn between pity and vindication. Anderson's voice cut through, still firm but edged with finality. "Meghan, this isn't cruelty. This is accountability. You've made accusations against powerful people who cannot defend themselves publicly. You've profited from those accusations. And when asked for facts, you fall back on emotion. That may win sympathy, but it doesn't answer the questions." Meghan shook her head, tears streaming. "You don't know what it's like. None of you know." Anderson exhaled, then turned his eyes to the camera. His closing words landed like a verdict. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when public narratives meet hard questions. Meghan Markle came here to tell her story, but journalism is not about versions. It's about truth. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable." The camera zoomed in on his face as he delivered the final blow. Titles and fame can amplify a voice, but they cannot replace substance. And without Harry's name, Meghan Markle would not be sitting here tonight. Meghan's head dropped, shoulders trembling. Anderson placed his pen neatly on the desk. "This interview," he said quietly, "is over." The screen cut to black. Millions sat stunned. Some felt sympathy, others vindication. But all knew they had just witnessed one of the most explosive interviews in CNN history. If you found this breakdown powerful, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story like this. More explosive interviews, celebrity meltdowns, and behind-the-scenes confrontations are coming your way. Because when powerful people face tough questions, you never know how it's going to end.